Welcome back to Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV, and we're all quite fed up, really, with the almost daily feed of public funds gone missing. Parliament, as a body that represents the public, has a strong mandate to check the misuse of power, but lately it seems that political leanings have undermined that duty. Accusations and counter-accusations abound. So today's guest is Mandera County Senator and Chairman of the Finance Committee, Bilo Kero. We should have had the current chairman of the PAC, Nicholas Gumbo, but he didn't get back to us. And there are those who believe that, you set out the context for us, Parliament's role, what Parliament is able to do, the role of the PAC. There are those who believe that an example of political leaning, perhaps, might be, within the current NYS saga, and the fact that recently more names have been mentioned, and for some reason those people have not appeared before PAC. Is that something you would agree with?
There's no doubt that the independence of Parliament has been impaired or has been, interfered with in recent years, particularly our National Assembly. And that has a significant impact on the way the committees operate. That has a significant impact on the way they conclude. One of the things that really disappoint me mostly about our Parliament these days is that when committees do their reports, you often find that they either don't get tabled, or when they don't get adopted, or if they get adopted, they'll have been, some things watered down and so forth. And all that clearly indicates that either there's an interference coming in from the executive, or there's some rent seeking, like you said earlier on. So I agree that that's why I said it's about the political parties, really. The leadership of the political parties significantly weighed in on what's happening in Parliament, and this is why you find all these dimensions to NYS and many of the other issues that are being investigated.
I must say, for the sake of our viewers, and to be fair to Mr. Gumbo, he did express some discomfort about appearing on the show this morning because they were in the process of working on the NYS report, and he wasn't, comfortable about speaking before that was tabled. I think he felt rather constrained by that. But there are people who say, that certain people are getting preferential treatment. You have the power to summons people. You have done that in some instances. In other instances, you haven't.
Don't forget one thing, that even committees, although they work as a team really for Parliament, they are made up of political parties. In fact, their representation is based on the political strength of the coalition. So the chairman's role is limited to really getting, and if for example, they want to invite a particular member, they will put it on he'll put it on the table. And so it's a question of them discussing and agreeing on it. If the vote is that we should not invite him, and the political interest, Parliament is about politics, so you can't rule out the political interests of any particular group in a committee or even at the House level. So I think I'm not surprised. Maybe the decision that was made based on the majority who are of the view that that person. Then there's a second point. There's a standing order also requirement in both houses, that the standing orders normally don't allow the Speaker of the House or the Clerk of the House or a member of the House to be summoned before a committee without the leave of the House. This is just for the purpose of the integrity of the House, really, so that, if you don't do that, then tomorrow the Member of Parliament or the Senator of Mandera can be summoned before the MCA, the County Assembly of Nairobi, or the Speaker of Nairobi can be summoned in some. So to avoid that, I think there is generally, and this is practice worldwide.
But what does the Constitution say in regard to that same issue? Because there has been that conflict.
Integrity of the institution. So what the law requires is that they must get the leave of the House.
That's the standing order.
That's the standing order.
Which means for the committee now to invite more comment. Who is a senator?
Yes,
they need to go to the Senate.
They need to go to the Senate. He needs to get leave of the Senate to appear before. He needs to get the leave of the Senate to appear before the Public Accounts Committee.
But Mheshimiwa Bilo Kero, what does the Constitution say in regard to the operations of this?
The Constitution apparently is very strict. The Constitution provides for the establishment of standing orders by both houses of Parliament.
Does it say who they can invite?
It gives that responsibilities is briefly to the standing orders. Standing orders is now what goes into details on how the houses will govern themselves. But the Constitution clearly provides that the houses must be governed by the rules that are provided for in the standing orders.
Go ahead.
I want to take you back to what you had said earlier on about how to dissect these reports, and you mentioned the issue about it would be prudent for a House committee, for example, a departmental committee, to wait for a report from a professional. In the case of Ministry of Health, the report that caused all this apparently came from an internal auditor. Is that correct?
An interim. It was interim.
Interim, yeah.
But also internal, yes.
It was internal, it was interim.
It came from a professional person, an auditor, internal, interim, be that as it may. Was that okay?
You know, one of the motivations by Parliament of getting into this thing is to try and nip in the bud if there is any, or disrupt any activity of corruption that may be in the process of happening. That could be so. But I think the important thing is that you cannot use an interim report even in a court of law. You can't. I mean, it's an interim report, it's an interim report. Once it's finalized, it happens even in the private sector. When the auditor, even the external auditors for private companies, for this company, when they do an audit for Citizen, they would submit a draft report to get the views of the directors on certain issues which are queries that they have raised. And so after they get the responses on the queries is when they finalize the audit report and then give their opinion. I think what is important is for the auditor to have finalized and given his opinion now on and this is why subsequently when he appeared before the Senate, he said that he was still not sure, or he was still trying to finalize. It's not like we're saying that there's no money lost or whatever, but the thing is that he's still waiting to get documents or evidence or getting some clarification or substantiation to the queries that he has raised so that he can conclusively then, finalize the report and say, yes, on this one there is so much money lost, or this, there's no value money here, or there is no provision of goods and services in this particular contract. I think that aspect of it is what had not been finalized. But I think there's nothing that stops Parliament from getting any kind of evidence or inviting anyone to give evidence, because Article 125 allows them to summon anyone. That is what they use. But for me, I think for good, orderly business of the House, I think it's important that we get professionals to conclude their work and submit to Parliament, so that Parliament, as we interrogate people, we base it on evidence that has been provided before the House.
Isn't it the
so
case?
That it's not hearsay, it's not mudslinging, it's not, of course there's politics. Many of these things are happening because of each party is trying to get political capital out of it.
Apart from rent-checking by committees of Parliament or whatever, members of Parliament, isn't it the case that they too do not trust those other institutions? They may not trust the NDPP, they may not trust the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, they may not trust the CID. So they say, since we don't trust those guys, let's do it ourselves.
No, it's true. We have serious challenges with some of the institutions, primarily because of the delay. And also we think, for example, my committee deals with a lot of petitions from the county governments. And most of the petitioners, really, their main complaint is that they've taken those issues to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption. For years they've waited, no investigations are being done. Or if they're done, nothing comes out of it. So, and then ourselves also, we have seen actually when we started now looking at those things, that, for example, Ethics and Anti-Corruption went to a particular county or collected documents, original documents, and nothing has come out. 1 year later, there's nothing. A good example, recently we were looking at the wheelbarrows thing on Ngoma. So when the governor came in, they didn't have any documents, because all the original documents relating to the procurement process of that thing were taken by Ethics and Anti-Corruption nearly a year ago, and they still haven't concluded it. So there is that, of course, feeling within the House, within members of Parliament, that these institutions may not really may have been influenced or may not be willing to, but the same also is what Kenyans will tell you about Parliament.
Yes.
I mean, when reports come out from Transparency, they'll tell you Parliament is the least trusted. So because there are many who think that parliamentarians get into this thing because of rent seeking and so forth. So the perception is there on both sides. But I think it's still important, even with all those, for Parliament to actually conduct its business in a more orderly and professional manner in accordance with the standing orders.
Our viewers agree with you, actually. Fred, I think Parliament has failed seriously on this, and it's proved by the way committees are conducting their business, e.g. the NYS issue. They tend to apply selective justice by summoning the little fish and shielding big fish. And the specific, Fred is specific about Senator Merkerman. being summoned to restore public trust on what they're doing. Otherwise, what we're seeing is hide and seek. It seems the government is not ready to fight corruption. Instead, it's only twisting the minds of Kenyans as they want to say that even the opposition is involved in corruption. Andre and Tito, Kenyan MPs are all corrupt and they're not willing to fight corruption. None of them has bothered to sponsor a bill against corruption to Parliament. If they can make a bill, no, that's a bit too violent. Corruption takes place due to lack of supervision. Fred in Kilifi. And then, you know, the government has failed us completely. In fact, Kenyans have no fidelity with it at all. This is someone, Dennis in Kilome. Corruption and impunity are rampant. Today, even village chiefs roam their respective locations like marauding elephants, creating havoc everywhere, even after Ugatuzi 4 years down the line.
You know, like what I watched last night on the station here on the 2 members of Parliament. Yeah. That kind of thing should not happen. And the Speaker of the House should not allow...
You're referring to the conversation on our sister show, the big question between
the 2 members of
Jeanette
and Chungwa.
Yes.
I mean, it shouldn't happen. And the Speaker should not allow that. Because really, for members of Parliament to appear on a national TV and accuse each other, and both of them are in the same house, probably even the same committee, and probably investigating the same issues, and then to come out and this one is tabling these documents and this one is tabling these documents. I mean, that will tell you how low we have gone in terms of handling issues in Parliament. It shouldn't happen. It will not happen anywhere else, I'm telling you. Ideally, if members of Parliament had those kind of issues, they have an opportunity to appear before the committee.
Wouldn't that be taking us back to the era where information was...
No, wait a minute. They can go before the committee and table those documents before those committee who's dealing with that particular investigation. Or there are also others that deal with the powers and privileges. You know, if there's any misconduct or any whatever that you can name a member of Parliament in the House, you can raise that issue before the... But I think to appear before the committee and I bang this, you know, it doesn't really help. What you're telling Kenyans is that members of Parliament are unable to resolve issues out there in the House in the manner that they're required to do according to their mandate. And they are now simply coming out the way, you know, journalists and
Senator, you seem to be taking issue with the erosion of dignity of the House.
For me, that is.
What about the right to information, though? Because you've already talked about, you know, investigations and let me finish the question, being subverted by politics. And clearly what we saw on display yesterday and what we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks, whether it's the president's sister, whether it's the governor in Kilifi, is, you know, the political nature. Not just of corruption, but just of everything that we do in this country. We cannot come to any sort of objective agreement about what the problem is. Everything has been politicized. So if you say that these 2 gentlemen should have presented themselves before any of the relevant committees before the House, these same committees that are either rent-seeking, lack capacity, that the speakers, you know, have failed to properly lead, how does that serve the Kenyan public?
If they did what they did before the committee, one, you will still have the same access to information because our committees are open to public. It's not like yesterday in a parliamentary conference I told you. There were one member of Parliament from Central African countries was complaining about, they represent 7 countries in Central Africa. Their laws up to now do not allow their committees, you know, deliberations to be open public. And so nobody knows what really those guys do. We are better off. But everything that they say here, they can say it before the committee and it will be public. It will be public and you'll still get all the information, but they'll be orderly. You know, they'll be disciplined in terms of the way parliamentarians would have operated because they're doing so in accordance with the standing orders and they'll do it before a committee. And the committee would then be in a position to take action, you know, based on that. And it will form the evidence. Whatever is provided will also form evidence. You know, then, you know, you're protecting the dignity of the institution also. You know, what is happening now is that Kenyans are losing confidence in the institution instead of the individuals. So that even if these members of Parliament go tomorrow, and a new lot come, some Kenyans will have already lost confidence in Parliament as an institution, and that is the risk of you know of.
But isn't it the case that Kenyans have lost Parliament, confidence in Parliament and the individuals?
But they ought not to lose confidence in Parliament and institution. Parliament is a critical institution in providing oversight, you know, to the executive. It's about the members of Parliament that they ought to be talking about. They can say we have lost confidence in the majority of members of Parliament,
but not in
and they have an opportunity. And by the way, electoral process is one of the key accountability avenues in all over the world. That's why the public have an opportunity. But it is important to distinguish Parliament as an institution, really, from the members of Parliament who will come and go.
Mheshimiwa, the first viewer who gave their comment is wondering why the double standards. Because it's saying the small fish are invited, interrogated, the big fish are not. You mentioned the issue of standing orders, and you followed it a short while ago with Article 125 of the Constitution, which gives the Parliament committee to, the powers to invite anybody and everybody. Which one is superior, the standing orders?
No, the Constitution. The Constitution, definitely. But I think
so regardless of what the standing order says,
is right. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I'm not disputing. What he says is right.
Selective justice.
There is selective justice in Parliament, in the executive, in judicial, everywhere in this country. That has been our practice. But in Parliament, that really ought not to happen. I mean, when Parliament committee has evidence before it of culpability, someone has been mentioned. The procedure of Parliament is if someone has been mentioned adversely, to invite that person to come and clear his name or to come and give evidence with regards to what
so when I'm a member of Parliament, I have been mentioned, and I write to the chairman of an account committee and say, I want to appear and give my verdict. Is it upon the chairman to deny me a chance to appear?
It is upon the committee led by its chairman to decide whether to invite you or not. And they must be having a reason, and they need to tell Kenyans, for those who have written to appear before the committee, why did they not allow that particular individual to appear? I think it's important for them to probably, if Chairman was here, probably that's one of the things you would have
So who
asked
should seek leave of the Senate or the National Assembly?
No, if I am invited to appear before a committee, I should seek leave of the House. I should go under Article section Standing Order number 45 before the House and seek leave, and to appear before that committee of Public Accounts Committee of National Assembly to answer or to address the issues that have been. That I am sure the House would then vote on it, pass a resolution, say you can proceed. I think that is the procedure. That is the procedure. Yes, that's the procedure.
Did you want to, while you gather your thoughts, Mutegi, this Cheche, Parliament is not doing anything to check runaway corruption or misuse of power. MPs have become spokespersons for their parties to an extent where parliamentary committees cannot come to a consensus on anything that will help Kenya. The chief executives of Kenya are so busy playing to the gallery instead of addressing vices. Our country needs divine intervention to salvage us from the helpless situation. So how do you go about restoring confidence? Everything that's coming here just, completely jaded cynicism. We don't trust Parliament. We don't trust our politicians. We don't trust the MPs. We don't trust our leaders.
No, we shouldn't lose hope. I think, in my view, the Speaker, particularly the speakers of both houses, need to rein in their members. There are standing orders that govern the houses. There are laws that govern the House in terms of the powers and privileges and their conduct and so forth. There is the Constitution. Committees have got specific also provisions, some of them in various acts of Parliament, like public finance management and so forth. So I think the speakers should really not allow Parliament to degenerate in the manner that is happening.
How is that even possible, considering the process of the election of the speakers? How is it even possible?
I mean, the position of the elections of the speakers happen all over the world, but still, I mean, they're everywhere, the elections that happen, but you can still control the way things are done in terms of the way committees operate, in terms of the way members of Parliament take debates out of, out of the institution itself, out of the committees, and take it out, in terms of the way they are supposed to submit reports to the House and those, and so forth. So I think there's a way. And speakers have done it. It's not the first time. There's a history of Parliament for centuries, and I mean, they ought to really rein in the House so that committees, Parliament's dignity is not lost. For me, that
but aren't our chickens coming home to roost? Because where we have tried to elevate the quality of parliamentarians that we elect, we have watered those provisions down. Whether it's education, whether it's integrity, whether it's past service, all of those have been watered down to ensure that anybody can get into Parliament. Okay, and Parliament itself has watered down those provisions. So isn't this a function, of that?
Yes. No, I don't agree with one thing, that about the education aspect, but I agree with, I agree that...
education and capacity, you've talked about it, people not understanding their role, their rules. You are an auditor, you're an accountant, you understand numbers, you can follow a trail, okay? Now, not many people can do that.
Yes,
right?
no, I just want to clarify this issue of education. I know it's wrong. Personally, I would have wished that they would have put in the limit, that all members of Parliament must be university graduates because of the responsibilities of the committees, responsible responsibilities, you know, that you have in the House for legislation and oversight and so forth. Representation is not a problem. Representation, anybody can be in Parliament, really, and their leadership quality is not always tied to education. There are people who have, you've seen in the past, the way some of the leaders we've had in this country. But I agree with you significantly on the fact that Parliament tended to water down some of the provisions. Parliament has always found an opportunity to try and address their concerns more than the concerns of the common man. So that when those laws are made, they are not made for any reason other than to allow some of the members of Parliament to have the opportunity to come back. That I agree, but it's still, I don't think that is an excuse. It is not an excuse for the mediocrity that we see now, really, in our institutions. I don't think it's an excuse. I think there are very brilliant people in Parliament, in both houses, very highly educated people who have experience and so forth. But the issue that Mutegi has raised about rent-seeking is one of the fundamental influences. The issue of capacity, people not having the practice of the way Parliament ought to, operate and so forth. That lack of discipline generally, the way, that they're not being held to account by, the speakers, the way they ought to have been held to account, ideally. And then, of course, once still is the influence by the executive. I really think if the president wants to succeed, and I've said this in writing in my columns, he ought to allow Parliament that independence.
But I'm asking,
it will help him.
The question to me is this: when the president is influencing, we have a constitution which makes Parliament independent. Why, if there's someone to State House or wherever there's someone to wherever to eat or not to eat, why can't they refuse? They don't have to.
We tell you asking the obvious. This is a political party. You are a member of that political party. The leadership of the political party is the presidency. And so this is why if the members of Parliament in a particular party feel obliged to immediately jump to the defense of the political party or the defense of the presidency, in the same way that these other ones also jump to the defense of their leader in the opposition. So that is what I think ought not to happen. I think members of Parliament should also know that in addition to being political party members, they are also there in Parliament as an institution that should be providing oversight on behalf of the public. Yeah. You have been elected by people to go there and represent them.
Doesn't that go back to the common Mwananchi who decides whether Bilokero will go to the Senate or not based on his party loyalty? Because if Wananchi knew that the responsibility of a leader is to represent them and not the party.
I agree. The public, with all due respect, also takes some blame. I'll give you a good example, like what happened in Central. You saw what happened in Nyeri a few months back. You see the public blaming members of Parliament for not coming to the defense of the government because they feel that this is their government, that is their political party, and if the government is criticized, you have not been fast enough, you have not been quick enough to defend the government. And so that member of Parliament, I've seen members of Parliament in Nyeri a few months ago sometime when the governor was trying to accuse them of not being supporters of the government and, being shouted down for not being really. So members of Parliament sometimes are also being driven by that kind of situation where they feel that if they don't come out strongly in support of the government, then they also risk not being support on the ground. So the public also tends to and you've seen some of the comments on what happens even on the media. Many people take positions, public even take positions on the basis of where their political loyalty lies, unfortunately.
We have to take a break now. This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. We're asking the question, has Parliament failed to check corruption in Kenya? Tell us what you think. Our SMS number is 22422 and our Twitter hashtag is Cheche.